So the first thing that you want to do is start by brewing your tea. And I use a big stainless steel pot. It's about a gallon of water. And I bring my water to a boil. And then I add my tea bags. And you want to use black tea. And I usually use about 3 tea bags per gallon of water. So once my water gets hot, I'll turn the heat off. And I'll add my tea and I'll add my sugar. I usually use about 1 cup of sugar to 1 gallon of tea, but you can sweeten the tea as much as you like. I find that if the more sugar you use, obviously the sweeter your kombucha is in the end, and that actually makes it a little better to me, a little tangier than vinegary. You can use any kind of tea you want. I just pick a cheap tea. Some people like to use organic tea. Some people like to use loose tea, but I just use a regular black tea bag. Now, after your tea is brewed, you're going to take your SCOBY. You're going to wash your hands. You're going to make sure that you wash your hands nice and clean. You don't want any oil or lotion on your hands, and you can rinse them with vinegar or apple cider vinegar to make sure that all of that's off. And you're going to take your SCOBY and you're going to put it in your jar with about 1/2 cup of starter liquid. And the starter liquid is just kombucha that you previously brewed. So you're just going to put your SCOBY down in your starter liquid, and you're going to pour your previously brewed and cooled, it has to be cooled all the way down, tea into your jar with your SCOBY. So you're going to fill that jar all the way up, and then I take just a folded up paper towel. You could use cheesecloth or a cloth, and I place that on the jar and put a rubber band around it. Different people do this different ways, but this is really easy and it works. And you want to make sure that it's sealed all the way around that. Just get that up there. And that keeps the bugs out and it lets it aerate. So then you're ready to put this in the cabinet. I store mine in the cabinet here. As you can see, I have some previously brewing, and you leave it for, the specified amount of time, depending on the temperature. If the temperature is warm, the warmer it is, the faster it's going to ferment. The cooler it is, the slower it's going to ferment. So you want a nice steady temperature. I don't bake a lot. My oven's right here, so I feel like this is a good place for it. And then, I check it at about 7 days. I usually do 7 days. That's about right for me, but some people like it a little stronger, some people don't. So you just have to kind of keep an eye on it and kind of get the feel for the temperature in your home and what works for your taste. Now, after my first ferment is done, I take my jars out and I'm ready to rebottle these into for the second ferment. So this is where you add the flavors, because you don't want to ruin your SCOBYs. Flavored teas and different things have oils in them, and that can kill the SCOBY. So the flavors always get added in the second ferment. Now, if you get a little overgrowth of SCOBYs because they grow pretty quickly, you could always test it out and see if you can keep them alive with the flavors that you want. But I like adding my flavors in the second ferment. I save glass bottles, like this was a juice bottle, this was an alcohol bottle. I removed the label that have nice tight screw-on lids. Wine bottles with corks don't work that well because as the kombucha ferments, it builds up gas and it can blow the cork off and spew all over everything. So you always want to use glass to store it in, and I use a plastic. You don't want to use metal on your kombucha. Like a metal strainer. So I take my fermented kombucha, pour it into my second ferment container. It's not going to quite fill it up. And since I'm recording with one hand, I'm not going to go for more. This you'll use to brew more. So you just set that aside. You can always put it in a clean jar if you want and wash that jar. That's what I usually do. So now what I usually use for flavor are flavored tea bags. So I get flavored tea bags. These are two of my favorites, the ginger and the wild raspberry hibiscus. So I've used all the ginger, but I just simply open the tea bag and unwrap it, and I put it down in the jar, and I make sure that it can get down in there like that, get wet, so it can marinate. And then I put my lid on it, and I set my jars back for the second brewing process. And the second brewing process usually takes, again, you know, depending on temperature, a few days. I check them about 3 days. If your kombucha is really fizzy, you definitely want to burp your bottles. You know, you just take the lid and unscrew it. Some people use the flip top bottles. I prefer these. You could use whatever you want. You can use whatever flavored tea bags you want. Some people use fruit. They use fruit juices. There's lots of information on the internet, so you can, you know, get recipes and, you know, experiment as much as you like. But you can even add, I've even added sugar after the second ferment if it wasn't sweet enough. You know, dissolve some sugar in a little, you know, like simple syrup, and put in there to make it sweeter. So you, kombucha scobies work best with black tea and sugar. You know, green tea, white tea, they don't do as well. You can still use it, but black tea and sugar is the best thing to use for those. So hopefully this helps get you started. And at this point, you're ready to take your leftover SCOBY and brew more tea and start again. And these little guys, they multiply very quickly. As you can see, that one's pretty thick. That jar is pretty thick. And here I have a storage that I keep my leftovers in. And this is just a continuous brew. I can always take starter liquid out of this and put in my jars. Because you always, when you start new kombucha, you know, when I put new tea in this, I always want to have starter liquid, about a half a cup of starter liquid in there with my SCOBY. And your starter liquid is, you know, just what you didn't pour out from the previous batch. So I use these for different things. Facials, you can blend them up and put them in your smoothies. People make food out of them. You can use them on your plants in your garden. You kind of get attached to them a little bit. It's odd that you see them grow and then all of a sudden you'll like them. So anyway, good luck. If you have any questions, let me know.